Hi, everyone. This is Bob Burge with the Indiana Department of Workforce Development. Thanks for joining us. Today's program was Next Level Jobs 3.0. We're going to take an inside look and from some of the folks that are spend time on this every day. So Brian Silk and Beth Megashar is going to be leading today's discussion. Thanks for joining us. And with that, Brian Silk, before we jump into the employer training grant, why don't you tell us a little bit about 2 years in the making? How have we gotten to this point?
Certainly. Thanks for having me, Bob. Brian Silk. I'm with the employer engagement team here at the Department of Workforce Development. Those of you watching this currently, that is not my picture. That looks probably a little more like Beth, very handsome gentleman, but indeed not me if you see me out on the street. So we were very proudly brought into this conversation in August of 2017. And what started as sort of thank you to employers for training talent across our communities due to supply chain shortages. It was a thank you, here's some reimbursement funding for training talent, you're strengthening our Hoosier communities, and it was to reimburse employers for training in the state. What we've seen over the course of time throughout the last few years is that this is catalyzing a lot of training across the state. So now employers are beginning new training programs, revisiting their training programs, getting back into upskilling talent in their organization. So we're really happy to be a part of that. We've had over 500 employers take advantage of the reimbursement funding to date, and we're over $10 million in obligation and roughly 4,500 trainees since the program started.
Okay, let's talk numbers a little bit, Brian, from a historical perspective. What's this all about?
Sure. So it's critical that we think about workforce differently. Yesterday's talent pools are today's talent puddles, and we do not have a robust supply chain for talent. So upskilling current employees is a really good way to get that started. We need to do a lot more work-based learning and reach deeper into the K-12 space to better inform the talent of tomorrow, the jobs of today and tomorrow. So we have millions of jobs to fill in the next decade. We're both excited about that as workforce development professionals, but very nervous as a member of the community. So this is a really neat way to kind of start that training and expand that program, training programs across employers in our high demand industry.
And at the heart of Next Level Jobs are two very important grants, and you're going to cover the employer training grant and walk us through what that's all about, what employers need to know, what they need to do, more importantly, right? So let's talk about that and what areas, what sectors are we talking about when it comes to the employer training grant?
Sure. So what we see on the slide there are the 6 key economic sectors that we're focusing on with high demand jobs. It's important as an employer that's viewing this now and you're considering applying, we would ask you to do that immediately while we still have funding. It's not important that you identify the best thing immediately. So if you're in advanced manufacturing, but you do maybe have a transportation need, just select one application only, select the best industry that meets your current needs, and we'll help navigate you to the obligation.
And your team is available to help with that. If I'm in the advanced manufacturing business, but healthcare is my audience, your team can help them decide which door to come in, right?
Absolutely. And there's really no wrong door after what you pick that box. Interactions here are more than beyond transactional. We want to really get to know your company and see how our community can support you even more than just this training reimbursement.
Okay, let's talk dollars. Let's talk money. What's this all about? What's it mean for employers? I know these amounts have gone up, and let's take us through on how businesses can benefit.
Sure. So it's important to know, those of you here with us today, that this is for new hires and current employees. We see the bulk of our employer interactions surrounding current employee training so that they can upskill talent and then bring on new hires after that. They're eligible to receive up to $5,000 per trainee, and this is employer demand driven. So it could be a group of training that you're doing. It could be at multiple training providers. It could be in-house. There's a number of different opportunities here, but key thing to take away here, this is employer demand training reimbursement. So you are the expert on what you train your talent for. We're just identifying occupational skills so that we can inform training providers of tomorrow to prepare talent for you more completely. So up to $5,000 per trainee, up to $50,000 per employer. That is based on a federal employer identification number. So if you have 2 or 3 sites here in Indiana, you can take advantage of that reimbursement program up to a few different times. The wage gain is important for current employees. You've invested a lot of time and energy and funding training these new employees for you to upskill them. It's important that they see a wage gain. There's no formula for that. We can supply you with labor market intelligence if you have questions about that, what you see in your community and what your competitors maybe are looking at to make sure we're competitive in your marketplace. The training, all training must yield a certificate. So that's a slightly newer component of the 3.0. So we see certificate attainment there across the state. And it's important, again, occupational skills training and greater than 40 hours. So this you may see in your HR occupations where they have, well, I've got 2 or 3 seminars that they go to, and we would want to bundle that. Just a cumulative 40 hours. It needs to be greater than 40 hours.
40 hours could be spread over a week, 2 weeks, over a month if needed, right?
Yes, and just different components. That's great.
Okay. Hey, let's talk about jobs. Talk about occupations. What kind of occupations are we talking about?
So what you'll see before you hear are by industry. So those are the top titles to date of training in those industries. So our state needs an incredible amount of machinists, CNC operators, community health workers, nursing assistants. Those are really big on the 4th bullet. That's your healthcare occupations. The important thing here that we want to illustrate is that, again, you could have multiple occupations be reimbursed for at your business. So if you're in maybe agriculture, but you need welders and maybe a bookkeeper or a diesel engine specialist, your training can cross multiple industries. There's this list there on the website. There's actually 147 occupations that you can choose from.
And I think we're going to take a look inside. And again, this will be at nextleveljobs.org to see a specific list. And you can see, you can go into the sector here, and now you can look into advanced manufacturing, right? And some of these are real specific, but some of them are set up by design to be a little bit general, like machinist and some of these, right?
Absolutely. Great question, Bob. And what we want, again, encourage employers, talk to us about it. Don't self-select out. These are based on federal occupational codes and has a lot of really silly jargon in that. They don't match your employer job titles. We'll help you get there. So don't overthink it.
Okay.
We're really here to help you.
Okay. So titles at some places are really important. Don't get too caught up in that here, right?
Yes,
so
sir.
If I'm a manufacturing business, but I need an IT person, we're going to be able to find how to get that reimbursed, or at least look into that, right?
Absolutely.
So I know we've taken a look at some of the jobs and what those are. Again, those are at nextleveljobs.org. Let's take a look at the grant itself. Let's take a peek at, here we come up. Now let's go to, next we're going to come up with the, how easy is this?
So when we present this in person, we see a lot of maybe wrinkled brows with faces across the audience when we say that it truly is remarkably easy to work with us on this. It's a 3-minute application. There's a few fields that we'll walk through later in the slides here today. But what our big thing that we're concentrating on would be that far left box. You raise your hand for this training. We need to see your training plan, the job description, and we catalog your salary range. So get that ready. You may have it now. You may be thinking about it. Go ahead and apply, and we'll get you connected. Once our committee has reviewed the training plan, again, employer demand training, you tell us what you need. We're just looking at the skills to make sure we can inform training providers of the skills needed across the state. We don't share training plans, but we will share skills included in these employer reimbursements. We do need to sign the agreement to show that we have the funding obligated to you. So if you don't apply, you don't have that obligated funding unless you can't seek reimbursement. We've had a couple of employers last year.
Okay.
Yeah, hey, I'm ready for reimbursement. And they hadn't applied yet, so we want to make sure you apply first. Good point of that training. This is, again, light touch. We'll check with you on your W-9 direct deposit, and we'll share an invoice. These forms you can see on the website now on nextleveljobs.org. They're in the employer forms area. So if you want to get an idea if your finance team wants to see that, or maybe your hiring manager wants to look at the invoice, we'll talk about that in the next slide. And then upon completion of 6 months time period, so 6 months after your training starts, it can still be going on. 6 months after that starts, invoice us, we'll pay you within 35 days.
Okay.
Electronic payment.
And I know this process has evolved with input from employers, right? I mean, it continues to get better and better, and employers have played an important role on streamlining it, correct?
That's absolutely right. And so when we started this in August of 2017, it was not this easy, and we've worked really hard. We've been empowered by the governor's office, by the workforce cabinet. Commissioner Payne expects this to be employer friendly. And in the 10 years that I've been in workforce development, this is the easiest grant program that I've ever seen. So it's employer driven, employer focused. We want to work with you. If you need fine print for this, like a string attached, that string would be talking to us. Let us hear what your anxieties are about the workforce of tomorrow, what we can do better to support you. So that's the fine print.
And I know I can say firsthand, we've done several of these live for specific industries, and before the live program was over, your team had applications coming in from people that were on the program live. So I think that really says how simple this is. People were multitasking, filling theirs out. They were excited, and they came into your team before the webinar was even over.
Yes, absolutely right. And we've actually had an application completely submitted with the training plan, the job description, and the salary range. That has been submitted, approved, and returned an agreement obligation in hours.
Okay.
We're a very competitive team, and we want to see maybe even quicker next time. But the times where we see a slight delay would be with employers that maybe are still really trying to carve out what that training is, or they don't have all the skills really thought through, and we want to help them do that.
Okay, let's go back to money again. We're going to, I know we touched on a little bit of this, but tell us a little bit more about some specifics here.
Certainly. So our friends in the consulting worlds sometimes come alongside employers to help them navigate the rough waters of government funding. And there's no lengthy reporting period. We simply want to see the employee level data. It's first and last name, last four of the social security number, the starting dates, what training you did. That 6 month retention mark, we need to see that illustrated. Again, you can see that form on the website. And then we have a cross check here of our database. We look at wage records to validate that they are with you and were paid what you said they were. So we don't come out with microscopes and get into your books at your employer site. So truly, really powerful reimbursement for employers training across the state.
Okay, let's take a screenshot of what it looks like. So what they can expect when they take a look.
Certainly. So we can go through this pretty quick. What you see there is the nextleveljobs.org website. And below Sheldon, there is the employers button. You go to the next slide, you'll see the 5 bullets up top and how quick this process moves. That's simply the grant guidelines, reiterating what we need to see. After that, it's company information. It moves into contact information. And then we ask an idea, hey, what were you thinking? What training are you doing now? What would you like to see reimbursed for? And then we'll work with you on that. You will then get an email confirming that we've received your interested application there. We reach out to you. When I say we, there's 7 of us that have worked on this over the last 2 years, and we're adding 12 more team members, even more across the state. Business consultants across the communities to work with you on this. So 2 to 3 business days, contact you. Again, just kind of confirming that's a call and an email. Just these are the things we need. You can be doing a lot of that in advance before we even set up that call. And then again, we're just driving toward that funding obligation, and we get out of your way, you train your talent, And you see us after that for reimbursement.
Well, great. Hey, Brian, that's a great walkthrough and a great quick tour of Employer Training Grant. Let's go with some questions. We're going to put up on the screen now some common questions that have come into you and your team, and so folks can look at these. And do you want to highlight a couple here and speak to those?
Certainly. So the two, I think most on this, maybe even three, but we will have these updated on the website periodically.
Okay.
As they come in, we adjust and adapt to those. But these are the most frequently over the last several months. When you receive the reimbursement, are there restrictions? You've already invested in training talent. We're reimbursing you for that. So there are no restrictions on that. Companies along the border of our states hire talent from outside the state. This is an Indiana employer reimbursement program. So you are able to train talent that may come from communities across our state line. Hopefully our economic development teams and the quality of life programs help lure them into our fine state and they become residents. So that's a piece of that. And then those of you who have skills enhancement funding or work one on the job training funding, we just don't want that on the same trainee, the same employee. That's important to do in other departments. We would love to braid support funding to you. So we want to kind of stack that in.
And I think we got one more slide here. You want to pick up on one of these?
Sure. So this current funding begins on July 1st of 2019. So that's important. The agreements last for a 9-month period. They default to 9 months. But if you've got some anxiety about making that 9-month period, we basically give you 90-day buffer to have that training start.
Okay. And I want to be sure I got this right, Brian, because employers often send people outside to be trained, not necessarily in their own building. They send them along in-state, out-of-state to be trained, 2 weeks, specialized training. How does that work? Can I get paid back for that?
Absolutely. It's employer demand driven. One of the very earliest reimbursements was a specific machine training that the production manufacturer of that machine was in Chicago. And so this employer from Shelbyville took their team up to Chicago for a few days. Now that training went well over $5,000. I think he was roughly $12,000 for that.
Okay, but they got 5,000 and 50,000 from.
Sure, yeah, and we want to make sure that's important that you know that this isn't really a magic bullet.
Okay.
Right. We know you invest far more than $5,000 per trainee. We're just trying to again thank you for training talent and upskilling across the state.
Well, Brian, that was excellent. So thanks for taking us through the employer training grant. With that, we're going to turn to the other side of the table. And Beth Megashar, Beth, let's talk about the Workforce Ready Grant and what people need to know about it, and specifically how employers can benefit from this individual program.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bob. I'm Beth Megashar, and I run the Workforce Education and Training team at the Department of Workforce Development. It's interesting because Brian's team really has autonomy over the employer train grant. Interestingly, and I'll get into this a little more deeply later, but we do not manage the entirety of the Workforce Ready grant because it trains people to both credit-bearing programs and non-credit-bearing programs. So mostly,
and can you break that down a second?
Sure.
Credit-bearing, non-credit-bearing.
Sure. In other words, Commission for Higher Education oversees probably the biggest portion of the Workforce Ready grant, and those are programs in which students can earn credits toward a degree. And we happen to manage the side that is called non-credit-bearing. In fact, it tends to be just quick training in which students can earn a certification.
Okay.
But they are not earning
single program, single course.
Yes.
With a credential or certificate that results. Okay.
So this first slide really speaks to education attainment challenge in Indiana, and it's not just Indiana. This is across the nation. What we are finding is that there are more options, Bob, than just college for folks, but really our world is changing. It's becoming very technical. And so what we do find is it's difficult for folks to just stop with a high school diploma and to be successful in our current economy. And what most Hoosiers will finally need to do is to continue on with some type of training. So we have a goal of 60 by 25. Other states do as well, and that means 60% attainment beyond just a high school diploma. Right now, Indiana is sitting at 41%. So you see we have more than half of Hoosiers who haven't gone on with their training after that diploma. And that does make it a challenge to be economically successful right now.
Okay, and what areas, what sectors? Let's take a look at that. I know Brian went through that exercise.
Sure, and I'm glad we have this because it is just a little bit different than the employer training grant. If you take a look, we share a lot of the sectors, but the Workforce Ready grant at this time does not tend to agriculture needs.
Okay.
It's just what we call the Big Five: manufacturing, construction, health science, IT, and then transportation and logistics.
Okay. And next up, we're going to take a look at kind of a little chart here that shows the process.
I like to show this because it can sometimes get confusing to those of us who don't live in this world all the time. So the Workforce Ready grant is really just one part of the Next Level Jobs initiative. Brian did a really nice job talking to you about the employer training reimbursement program, and that's represented on the left. And you'll see his name if you have further questions on there and want to reach out. And then on the right-hand side, it just gives a kind of a visual so that folks, again, understand that the Workforce Ready grant is kind of two different things. It's training programs that can lead to college credit in a person's pursuit then to maybe earn a degree. But it can also be short-term training for those who just want to skill up and earn a certification in one of those high-wage, high-demand sectors.
And those are also links that can go into those specific areas and also the contact information for each.
Sure, and at the table, Jessica Gray is our administrator, not simply just over the Workforce Ready grant, but also over our in-training program, and we're going to find out why that's so important and key to the non-credit bearing side of the Workforce Ready grant.
I know Jessica does a great job with that. So,
She does.
hey, let's take a look at just on the training providers overall, how that, I think we got a little slide here for that.
Yeah,
how many
sure.
are available?
I thought it was interesting. At the same time that the employer training grant rolled out in 2017, so did the Workforce Ready grant. But when it first came out, Bob, it only included credit-bearing programs. So we came on board just about a year ago with the non-credit bearing side. So when you take a look at this, when it first started, really Ivy Tech and BU were the only two providers. Up at the top, you will see that now those on the eligible training provider list are available to also train to the Workforce Ready grant. To the right, if you wanted to see a list of that, you could click on the approved training programs.
Okay, let's take a look and just to give them an idea of what that looks like. I know this list is frequently changing,
Sure.
right?
So this kind of takes us to the Next Level Jobs website, and if you were to click on a sector where you were interested, and if I went down, let's say I'm interested in welding, Dave, if you clicked on basic welding up at the top, I think.
Yep.
If you were to click on that, you would see that we have an adult education program that offers training to that. So it's nice to get on the Next Level Jobs website because any certification that you're interested in earning, to the right, you will see what providers can train to it. So that's kind of helpful.
And if somebody is a training provider and wants to get involved, can they contact your office?
They sure can. We have on the website there is an inbox that answers Workforce Ready grant specific questions.
Okay.
We also have an inbox just for like in training and the eligible training provider list. So we have lots of resources available. Also on this Next Level Jobs website, there are links to our office.
Okay, and you are looking to build that list, right?
We are absolutely looking to build
Okay.
that list.
Let's talk about requirements, eligibility. Let's go to that next, and we'll find out what it takes to get involved in this. If I'm an individual and I want to do that, or if I'm an employer and I want to skill up one of my employees, they can take advantage of this, right?
Exactly. So this is where it's fun because Brian and I really can work with an employer in tandem because if I'm an employer, I may have some employees that are eligible for the Workforce Ready Grant. So
Sure.
let's take a look at those. First of all, of course, you have to be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen. The second criteria is that you have to have your high school diploma or equivalency. And I think this next part will bring in a lot of Hoosiers. You can have some college credits, you just cannot have a degree. If you have a degree, it disqualifies you from being eligible.
Okay.
And then finally, the third criteria, of course, is that you must enroll into one of those qualifying certificate programs.
Okay.
In other words, one of those that are in the 5 sectors, and specifically with the Workforce Ready Grant, the non-credit bearing side, that certificate has to lead to a 5-flame occupation. So it's much more restrictive in terms of what you can be trained to than the employer training reimbursement side.
And so if I find a course on there I'm interested in, and I go in and I find a provider in there, I complete that, and then they actually contact me, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. All right, let's talk. You'd mentioned credit bearing, and so I think we're going to cover a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, I just want to point out the difference. Certainly, if you're signing up for a credit bearing program, the Commission for Higher Education is going to ask you, basically, if you want to click on all of these, they're going to want to make sure that you enroll, you do the paperwork to see if you're eligible for financial aid. They require that you fill out the FAFSA. And again, I just wanted to point that out because it's drastically different to enroll in credit bearing versus non-credit bearing. We don't care about any of this. But because it's part of Workforce Ready Grant, I just wanted to make
Sure.
Potential users aware of that
Okay.
difference.
And why don't you walk us through this step?
Yeah, this is for folks who are potentially interested in becoming a provider for the Workforce Ready Grant. First of all, I gave credit to Jessica Gray a little bit earlier. She runs our in-training and ETPL. If in order to be a trainer for the Workforce Ready Grant, you must first appear on our eligible training provider list. And really what that means is you've gone through some checks and balances and you are eligible to receive federal training dollars.
Okay.
So it's really just you've been checked out. So once they're on the ETPL, we also then have to make sure that the training results in an approved industry credential in one of those 5 sectors. And this, again, the third check is distinctive just to the Workforce Ready Grant. Again, the employer training reimbursement, I think, goes down to 3 flames for occupations. We have to train specifically to 5 flames. So again, we're talking about a much smaller list of occupations that are available. And then finally, our training providers have to agree to a 70-30 split. So for example, once I enrolled you, Bob, in my welding program, I could be reimbursed once you show up the first day of training. I could be reimbursed 70% then, and then get the final 30% once you complete the program and earn your credential.
Okay, so right out of the gate, you're getting 70%,
Yes.
and I'm not out of any pocket during the whole process.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's talk just a second about fees and money and what can be covered.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of training providers were used to another state program, which was Work Indiana. And it was a little bit different because Work Indiana paid for kind of some of the supports that trainers need to help students be successful. The Workforce Ready Grant is a little bit different because it only pays for training. Um, so it will pay for tuition and mandatory fees, and for some consumables. I like to use the welding example, for example, because you will utilize, um, what's the word I'm looking for, Brian? I don't know, the welding stick.
Sticks out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Plasma sticks.
So of course we pay for those, but it doesn't pay for like the helmets and welding and some of those aspects, which Work
Transportation.
Indiana did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, and if there are transportation barriers or childcare, and that's been a change for some of the regions to get used to.
Okay. And family income, it's not based on.
Yeah, it's really not. It's all about educational attainment. So again, if you're seeking to up your training, and as long as you have not already earned a college degree, you are pretty much eligible to take part in this.
What about limits? Are there any limits to how much a training provider can charge or get reimbursed?
There absolutely are, and again, we can be a little bit more picky even than the ETPL for the Workforce Ready grant, because what we do is we look at what is the average cost of welding
Sure.
training, and then we ask providers to adjust what they are going to charge. Now, we will reimburse up to $5,000 per student, but we won't just do that
Case by
randomly.
case. Okay.
Yes, it's case by case, and it depends on what the average cost of training is on the EPPL.
Okay. Hey, let's look at the application process. Brian took us through that. Let's see how that works. What's involved?
Sure, and I think just kind of high level, I already talked through this, but again, on the left-hand side, this just kind of visually shows that if you're not eligible for the ETPL, if you're not fundable on our in-training list, then you really can't even bother
Sure.
applying for the Workforce Ready grant. If you are not fundable and you are interested, I encourage that you reach out to Jessica and the in-training team and to figure out maybe what is preventing you from being fundable.
Okay.
On the right-hand side, just kind of visually represents, first, the answer is yes, I am eligible, I'm on the ETPL. If that is so, then you can put forth a WRG application. We're going to review that application and make sure that you fit all of those criteria. If you do not, then you're not going to be available, you're not going to be approved for WRG. If you are, we will send your information forth, and there will be a next level jobs icon placed by your training provider name on the ETPL.
Okay, you mentioned credentials and certifications a little bit earlier. I think the next thing we can take a look at that, right?
Yeah, my team also manages Indiana's promoted list of industry certifications. I just wanted to make sure, and this is for both employers interested in the employer training reimbursement as well as the Workforce Ready grant. If you are a training provider, I encourage you to take a look at this list first. These are certifications that employers in Indiana have said, we recognize these, but more importantly, we value these certifications. And someone who would earn this certification would have a leg up on employment.
So again, this was built in part by employers for employers,
yes,
not
absolutely.
not our agency or
right.
others.
For each sector, and we're seeing agriculture there, we had roughly 10 employers in the agriculture sector come in and really discuss all of the certifications on this list.
Looks like a wide range indeed,
Yes.
and this is probably, I think, our smallest sector listed, and there's lots of opportunity there.
So just so you know, if you were to get in, if you were to Google Indiana's promoted list of industry certifications, this list will come up.
Okay.
And it's on the agency's website.
If I'm an employer and I have a need and I don't see it listed there, is that something I can contact your office to consider?
Absolutely, and we encourage folks to do that because not only do we have this list We also have an application for a certification to be considered to make this list. So the next time we will review it will be at the start of the year in 2020. And to get on the list, a certification is once again going to be discussed and reviewed by a group of employers in that sector.
Okay. Well, Brian took us through a little bit about what it looks like, what to expect online when they get inside. So you're going to do something similar with.
Yeah. So we just want to show the audience what it looks like to partake in the Workforce Ready grant. So they would click on the "I am a next level job seeker" button, and when they click on that, what they're going to be asked to do is the first few questions have to do with eligibility. You know, are you a Hoosier? Just the same criteria I walked
Sure.
you through. Do I have any college? Do I have my high school diploma? After you fill out that information, you are going to click on a sector in which you're interested. Like, hey, I've thought about health science. I'd like to click on that and see what kind of opportunities are available. So I'm not, yeah, this takes you on. Basically, and this will ask for a little bit more information about you as a job seeker. And ultimately, if you'll click again, Dave, it says thank you. And this is a little bit behind on the new site because what you'll see, as we did a little bit earlier, if I were to have clicked on health science, I would see all of the certifications that are available under the Workforce Ready grant. And then when I would click on that, for example, medical assisting is a hot certification now. Once I clicked on medical assisting, I would see that there are several providers, including Ivy Tech and VU, but also several eligible training providers who can train to that certificate.
Okay. And as you mentioned, that continues to evolve. So I guess we encourage people at all times to get on there and see how it's changed, right?
Yes,
So,
and my challenge to the regions, you know, our hope is to have at least one really quality eligible training provider for each of those sectors in each region.
Okay.
That's a goal our team has set.
And before we let you go, Beth, for folks for businesses out there that want to get involved as a training provider, or they have employees they want to get some credentialing done and skilled up, feel free to reach out to your office. I know we got your contact information at the end.
Yes, and again, if you can't remember anything from this presentation, again, if you just go to the Next Level Jobs website, there it instructs you in how to get a hold of both Brian for the Employer Training Reimbursement Program and my team for the Workforce Ready grant.
Okay, and before we wrap it up today, I want to turn back to Brian Silk. Brian, tell us a little bit about the response. So how have things gone since this launched? I know it's evolved. We're at now the 3.0 stage. Things have changed. Things have gotten better. There is more money. Tell us a little bit about what how people have responded and show us some numbers.
So we've had to get out in front and do a lot of outreach and promotion on this. Your webinars have been really, really helpful over the last few years, so we appreciate you on that, Bob. And what we're encouraged by in this content you see there would be how much interest. So we've had over 1,500 employers raise their hand to discuss the reimbursement program with us. You'll see over 500 at advanced manufacturing. The second most raised sort of interested employers would be the health sciences industry, nearly 400, and then the building and construction trades at nearly 300. As you move across to the right there, when something says active, that means that we have funding obligated for them and they are training and then being reimbursed for training. So it's important to show that advanced manufacturing, a ton of interest, a ton of need in that industry across the state, and that we have nearly 30% by volume active in that industry. The healthcare industry leads the Next Level Jobs Employer Training Reimbursement Program with over 40%. We personally need to do a lot more outreach in our agriculture space. We've done a few things with our Department of Ag teams and Farm Bureau group and some of those employers, but I think it could be that they're just maybe not always keen on their crosswalk across industries. Like, hey, farming, agriculture, maybe crosses a lot of different industries. So it's just something as a reminder, just consider that applicability through this reimbursement program.
And this is a statewide program, right?
Yes.
So here we can see that there is interest throughout the state. That's important to note.
Absolutely. And Beth mentioned the regions just a few minutes ago. We have 12 economic growth regions, and what we'll see here from those areas, the most interest has been Northern Indiana. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 regions at the top of the state there. Then the Central Indiana kind of band came in, and then a lot more outreach that we've done down in Southern Indiana to get some more word out there. So this helps us. It's important, back to like Beth's comment about having those high quality training providers in the regions. We want to be sure that we have high quality employers to hire them. So it's great for us. This helps us navigate our outreach. So if we see an area that's a little lighter, we'll want to go out and maybe do some fun things and kind of blitz their community and get the word out about next level jobs.
The next one, I think one of the final lines we got here is the current response. Beth, we're going to turn it back over to you here. This varies a little bit from the employer training grant side. So this kind of shows where people are coming in for the Workforce Ready grant, right?
I think so. In fact, I think that IT and health might be, in actuality, in current time, maybe just
Okay.
opposite. I think
Sure.
IT leads the way right now
Okay.
in pulling down the most Workforce Ready grant dollars,
Okay.
at least on the non-credit bearing side.
Sure.
So perhaps these numbers
I think they do. I think they include the whole.
And then certainly in the non-credit bearing side, health and life sciences is a strong second. We too, transportation is the lowest for us, and I think part of that is we struggle finding enough 5 flame occupations, which we can put forth a short-term training program for.
Great.
I did want to just take a minute too, because Brian and I haven't done a lot of this, but we have had some great conversations with employers about braiding funding and working to incorporate both the Workforce Ready grant along with the employer training reimbursement program, because there are lots of possibilities. I'm sure there are many employers who have workers who perhaps don't have a college degree, and you could look at what certification could we utilize for the Workforce Ready grant side to help upskill them, and then perhaps move on to the employer training reimbursement to then pick up additional training.
Okay, Brian, anything more to add to that?
Absolutely. We had a friend in Winamac, Indiana, actually right before we did the short-term credentials. They identified a group of their production workers and brought 25 people in, and I presented that model to them for the Workforce Ready grant. So ideally, that team takes advantage of that first, and then after they get trained, they come back to us on the workforce or the employer training reimbursement side. So we're really excited to do a lot more of that over the next several months. I think it's just a matter of making sure that we get that story told, and so we're going to go back to that manufacturer in Winamac and get some ideas.
I know we had mentioned welding, and I know I had heard stories about employers that were in desperate need of welders. Now they take folks on their own staff, they send them out, they get them certified in welding, and now they got them back in, and it's all paid for. Mm-hmm. So, okay, hey, we've gotten to that point of we promised contact information, so this is how you get a hold of Brian and Beth and their teams, their respective teams, if you do have questions. And with that, before we conclude, I want to ask each of you if you can kind of look into your crystal ball and what might be ahead. This is the governor's Next Level Jobs initiative. Beth, what do you think the future holds for Next Level Jobs?
Well, I think it's really interesting. I think it's taken Hoosiers a little bit of time to wrap their brains around free training.
Sure.
There's been suspicion around that word free. People are like, what's the hook? So, but I would have to echo Brian's words that I think your webinars have been really helpful in getting the word out. And I think folks are starting to hear the message that Brian and I have been trying to share, like, hey, let's see how we could pull down both of these cool programs and benefit even more. So I look forward to just watching this grow. I think we're starting to get a lot more applications coming in. We're getting a lot of questions, and I think those are due to some of these webinars. It's starting to take hold.
Great. Hey, thanks, Beth. And Brian Silk, we're now 2 years in. You know, what has the last 2 years been, and what do you guys see for the future of the employer training grant?
I think, again, to echo Beth, some of that skepticism that started, maybe some to work with government. We are really nice people. We're here to help. I know that makes people either nervous or maybe disbelieve that, but we're genuine in our desire to work with you and to help your operations grow. I think that I'd personally like to see more funding for the Workforce Ready Grant team overall. So hopefully we can get that maybe shared with the governor's team. And then I think that we're seeing a lot of really strong communities form around this, so that you have your training providers maybe sharing more about the employer training reimbursement program and really building these innovation networks across the state that pull together community stakeholders to feed talent to employers so that the entire community thrives. So I think that's been really a neat side effect of this work.
Well, great. Hey, with that, I want to thank Brian Silk and Beth Megashar for all they do for Next Level Jobs on behalf of the Indiana Department of Workforce Development. And with that, we're going to conclude today's program, and please stay in touch. Thanks for your time.